Thinking about how we haven't had JunKaNoo in 2 years? Missing how all the color, movement, and rhythm in your belly? Pause, think about it with intentional thought, and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear what Chris, Ömo-Shango Davis got to say about how we got JunKaNoo in your belly. Stay tuned and listen to whilst our sponsors, Dom Dev Enterprises and Paget Investment, and our friends at Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles, and join us as we ask questions of this esteemed guest of ours tonight, and we find out why it's in our belly. JunKaNoo. We'll be right back.
Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. And what we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative 242. And as you're out there, be sure to ask your questions as we go forward. So this evening we have a special guest who's been trying to, the good man out there tried to stop him from being on the show with all kind of technical difficulties just now. But yes, not to worry about that. You know, the good Lord has a way of finding a way to get you to be where we need you to be.
Yes,
welcome, Chris.
Yes, man. Thanks for having me on once again. You know, always excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, we know you're not a stranger to us, but for those who might not know, since Chris was last on, he's been doing a lot of things and has a lot of projects going on also. And one of the things that we are proud of him of is that he's now have a more substantial position with the Antiquities, Monuments, how do you pronounce it? The Monuments, Antiquities, Monuments, and Museums Corporation.
There you go.
Right.
Yes.
Good. So, like you say, welcome back.
Yes, thank you very much. You know, good to be here, man. Yeah, and I like the title of the show too. You know, JunKaNoo in your belly.
Yeah, man. Yeah, because we can find out why it's in our belly tonight.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So as we say, if you're missing all the color, the movement, and the rhythm that make us feel good, you know, those are things that I would say is Bahamian, but.
Right.
You have discovered that it's not just Bahamian. There's some other places which we're going to tap into tonight to find out why it is. And so we want to be able to ask tonight, how did all of these things travel? And I look at your pictures in the background, and so they take me to a place where we're going to go tonight.
Oh,
and so the global people say that we feel things in our heart, but in the Bahamas, we say we feel things in our belly. You know, and our heart is spiritual, but our belly is physical, and we could touch it and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so what we want to ask you at this point in time, and then is this why the belly, in your belly, resonates with us so much? Why is it that when we have stuff in our belly, that always seems like, whether it's Gorbachev or you know, whether it's nice, sweet. Well, you always eat barracuda. I don't eat no barracuda, but you know,
I eat it.
You know, I can tell right there. So you know, people say those things when you get those, and our tourists, when they come in, they get sand. You say between your toes, but really and truly, you get that conch salad in your belly, and then they will come here all of the time. Why is that we actually experience that?
I think it's. Well, first of all, the terminology itself, you know, language is extremely important. And, you know, we always kind of grew up hearing these things about us speaking broken English. Mm-hmm. But in fact, we don't speak broken English. We speak distinct dialect of broken English. Ours is distinctly known, of course, as Kula and Geechee. And not only can it be traced to Africa, but it's even a little closer to home, so to speak, being in the southeastern United States seaboard. And so even when you look at a dialect called Pidgin English that's popular throughout West Africa, of course, with many variations. And then you look at our Gullah-Geechee language, you look at Jamaican patois, we all use this word belly, you know what I mean? And of course, I think it's also connected to this kind of soul food culture that we
Okay.
also share with these Gullah-Geechee people, you know? So it was always this, and then of course, just the way that people describe things differently culturally. So when we say in your belly, you know, sometimes even when something in your heart, you know, back in the day, you know, I married now, but I remember when I first met my wife, you know, I used to feel the butterflies in my belly. You know what I mean? My
Yeah.
heart was beating fast, but you know, so now when we use this expression in the context, of course, that you're using it in, we mean that it's just something that's a part of us. You know, it's just
Right.
something that we know. You know, and when I teach people about how JunKaNoo manifests in the Bahamas, you know, I tell them that you know you could get any group of guys and you know, 10, if you get 10 of them, 7 of them will be able to hold a good JunKaNoo beat. And nobody, and I don't ever remember anybody ever teaching me how to do a JunKaNoo beat like on a school desk or something like that, you know. So this is
Right.
something that is a part of us. And the reason why this is a part of us is also linked, not just, because I could say, of course, it's linked to the transatlantic slave trade, but then that leaves it very shallow. This is
Yeah, but
actually linked,
we can get into that in a second
right?
though. So before
Yeah,
we
you know,
get to that part though, but you say it's a part of us, but there's this drive, this feeling that there's almost like a thirst, a quench that you have to quench.
yeah,
You have to, like you say, people who got JunKaNoo in the blood, they have to have JunKaNoo or they feel they go
right.
crazy, not crazy,
Oh
but
yeah,
you know, they feel out of sorts
yeah, right.
and so forth. So we know about the language part, but what about the body? Is it the spirit or is it just the
Right.
physical body
So,
resonating with the
oh yeah, for
music and
sure.
everything else?
So JunKaNoo as in itself, you know, many of these things can be traced back to more ancient African customs
Okay.
that essentially are celebratory customs, a lot in the line of what you would see in most civilizations today. They
Right.
just kind of express it a lot differently, of course. So these, I would have to draw on, of course, the Kundum Festival, which is
Okay.
among the most ancient festivals in Ghana, right? And these were things that were done to thank God for a good harvest, thank God for being bountiful, to protect against bad energy and bad spirits. And of course, it was just something like JunKaNoo that you know that you had to do,
Right.
right? And again, it was something that was much deeper than song and dance. And of course, the narrative surrounding JunKaNoo has kind of been left at a shallow level where, you know, we just having fun in the song and dance. But again, like you say, it's some of us who, like, we got to rush. And even someone like me, you know, I don't rush every parade, I rush some parades. But even when JunKaNoo don't happen, you know, I feeling kind of empty myself in a lot of ways, you know. And again,
Oh.
this is something that's linked to us and it's almost indescribable. But it's almost a kind of spiritual thing in a sense, right? And when you realize the essence of JunKaNoo, of course, we spoke about a little bit before who the man really was,
Right.
and then you align that with the facts of our history, then you understand it was about freedom. You know, it was about rebellion towards the oppressor, not just being rebellious, but
Right.
rebellion towards the oppressor, towards the proverbial slave master and colonizer, right? And of course, for us, particularly if you could imagine um, being back in those days where all of your movements and everything was so restricted. And this was the one thing, you know, I think one of the Charles Farquharson, who had a plantation on San Salvador, he
Okay.
actually wrote about JunKaNoo happening on his plantation. And the way that he spoke about it was something that he was afraid of and didn't want anything to do with it. But from, of course, the perspective of the enslaved or Africans in the Bahamas, this would have been the one time that you had to hold on to who you are. You understand? So it would
Right.
literally be, God forbid, you know, somebody come here right now, take over the Bahamas and make Kong salad illegal. You know, and they make it illegal to do this and illegal to drink Sorosy and illegal to do all of these things. You know, we can be sneaking around and we can be doing it. And when we are able to tap into this thing that reminds of us home, you know, so when you're able to sneak in the back and make that Kong salad and you eat that Kong salad, it means so much more, you know. And so for us, even though the Bahamas, of course, it's not been stereotypically associated with revolution and rebellion and fighting against slavery, I think that this is something that not only manifests in the Bahamas, of course, it manifests other places as well. However, in the Bahamas, we can be extremely proud that we were the ones that kind of kept this story of this man going,
Right.
and right, and in some cases, it even appears that because I spoke to Dr. Pateman, Michael Pateman, he's an archaeologist. He's also a key member of our organization, Sankofa Flamingo, which we're
Right.
doing most of this research through. And he was telling me how even in Turks and Caicos, their practice of JunKaNoo actually came from Bahamian migrants and the kind of interconnection. And it's not that doesn't seem to be that direct link because their predominant African celebration, I think they call it Masai or Masi or something along those lines. But and so this influence is quite rich, and of course things get lost in translation over time. Obviously, we're not running around with a bunch of Europeans trying to physically enslave us and keep us on plantations anymore. And so the struggle, if you will, has kind of changed. The battlefield, of course, has shifted as well to almost being kind of an intellectual battlefield, a political battlefield, a social and economic battlefield, as opposed to a physical battlefield that encompassed all of those that I just said, right? And so I could go on and on about how important this
Yeah.
is to me. You see people
So
like Angelique McKay who just is junking
yeah.
24/7, Yeah.
Yeah. So let's stick here in the Bahamas for a little bit. So when we talk about JunKaNoo, what we see today in JunKaNoo, and I was trying to get permission to play one or two of the JunKaNoo groups' videos on YouTube.
Right.
I don't want to just stay and play it and then get in a little trouble with them. So,
Right.
but so people could see what we're talking about, and relate it to where we started. Because in the early days of JunKaNoo, JunKaNoo was started here. Why? What was it that did it do? We
Well,
just needed
it
a
was
day to move, get off the plantation and move, or did
well,
we
it
have
wasn't
a
even really
specific reason?
that. See, the first three slave ships that came to the Bahamas came from Western Ghana. And
Okay.
those three slave ships came over a period of about 50 years. And no
Wow.
one else came directly from Africa from that area. And so that is how it got there. And remember, John Canoe was this warrior merchant who fought against the British and the Dutch slave trade. And
Okay.
so many of the people, some of whom may have even physically fought in his army. And even after he died, his legend actually grew. And so even decades after his death, you had other Africans from the region. For example, William Answer, who was enslaved in Barbados, and he actually mentioned John Canoe by name, being like, "Man, we should have gone side with him." And now we kind of see the mission that he was on, and he experienced it. And now, and so this is how it got here in the minds and the souls of everybody else. And his name, so it's not like as if this parade, they started this parade because of this great man. This was something that would have happened regardless, but his name was attached to it and the namesake, and then of course, the atmosphere that we were in. We were,
Yeah. So what was
people
that
were
atmosphere
enslaving
though?
us.
Help our audience understand
Well,
why it took off once they get here. Because I mean,
right.
we seem to
So
have taken it to a level that nobody else has
yeah.
taken it to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it's rooted in our ancestors, in our ancestry, and those are things that you just can't explain. We just know. This is like sucking your teeth almost. You just know, you just do it, and you don't really know why, right? However, now when you look at it and how it manifests, of course, it evolved, right? So after those three slave ships came here, then you had numerous other ships coming from all sorts of other regions in Africa. And so you have, for example, the Gombe drum, which comes from the Djembe drum, which comes from the Mande people from present-day Mali. Then you have the Tom Tom, which comes from the Tam Tam from Senegal, almost in the
Right.
same region, way very far away from present-day Ghana, as a matter of fact. But those people kind of set this foundation. So it almost be like how you see here, we have many great diverse community here in the
Right.
Bahamas, and you'll have people coming from Trinidad, Haiti, the United States, and after they have their kids, and they, over time, you might see a steel pan in JunKaNoo because that's that Trini influence, but they still
Right.
calling that steel pan in JunKaNoo. And so
Right.
that was how it evolved. That's what caused, of course, a lot of the confusion as well. And then it was something that we began to do to celebrate emancipation, and it was kind of stuck to this emancipation,
Okay.
and it kind of worked out in our favor because, of course, it went in line with the British propaganda of them being the great enders of slavery and the conquerors of slavery. And so they, in a sense, let us do it. But in tandem with that, you have to understand that it was illegal for blacks to congregate in great groups and all of these things. This was something that was feared by the colonial government, by the status quo.
Because on that same point, there, Honorable Fred Mitchell said at a forum the other day that, in a speech that he's given, that we had the situation of, I forgot the name of the boat, what he said, what came over during the French Revolution.
Right.
And that's a part of our history that, not the French, the Haitian Revolution, the part of our history that we need to really start talking about, because he was talking about the color in the Bahamas and how people would wake up one day and the ruling party at the time, or group at the time, decided that because of the revolution, that it was no longer fitting the way blacks and whites were defined in law. So they changed the definition from the 3 persons removed to being all who had some persons in their ancestry as being black to being black. And so people woke up one morning who were white, and now they're black. And some people even committed suicide.
Right. I believe it was one man, I believe his surname was definitely McKinney. And it was one guy who that he was actually a slave owner and all of this stuff, considered himself white, living in the Bahamas on a different racial gradation scale, right? But it's so interesting. And of course, Fred Mitchell has a lot of historical knowledge as well. And there were many ships around that region. And as a matter of fact, the Haitian Revolution, as I kind of lay out in my book that I'm still working on, but essentially you can pinpoint the origins of our Haitian xenophobia to April of 1795. And this was when the British, who were trying to also get their piece of what was the richest colony in the West at the time, they were defeated in April 1795. And all of a sudden, there was this huge great awakening, like, oh my God, these guys, look, they're going to actually win. They defeated the British. And furthermore, we were stealing all of these enslaved people from Haiti and absorbing them into our own population. So that says, that is profound on many levels, chiefly in my view, because when you really look at that version of our history, nobody, and of course our actual blood has nothing to do with your nationality, but we have kind of adopted this kind of Americanized, I'm a blue blood Bahamian type of thing, not knowing that, even within the African bloodline, you have a huge diversity. And that's not even including the Europeans, the indigenous Americans, the Asians, and everything in between. You understand? And so race is very complex as well. And it's also even linked, of course, to what we're speaking about now, because, the whole JunKaNoo story, who he was and all of that got lost in translation.
Yeah, but we can touch on him shortly, but we'll not say touch, but we can dwell into him a little bit, because we want to know more about him. But I just want us to try and define for persons out there, because some people might know the history of the Bahamas and some people don't, when JunKaNoo started in the Bahamas. Like I said, my understanding was, they say they used to let you out to go play once a day, once a year or something. That was the colonial thing that they put on us. The times then, because at one point in time, the black people or people of color could not go on Bay Street, which was this main city, road in the city, and congregate with more than 2 or 3 people in a space. Right. So, the JunKaNoo has fuel, the energy that we have in JunKaNoo, was that fuel because those laws and stuff were in place where you could not socialize. We just went through COVID where people couldn't socialize, and you see what happened when they started letting everybody out. Most definitely that was definitely a major aspect of it. Also, things like JunKaNoo were also classified under the Obia Act. And so the Obia Act, there's 2 definitions of it. Obia initially was an Akan word, or Twi, I should say, Twi word, that's their language. And it essentially was a loose word that comes from Obia Fayo, that essentially just meant doctor or healer, you understand? Now, from the British perspective, Obia
in the English-speaking diaspora was a blanket term. So, as I mentioned before, drinking sorcery, they see you making some shepherd's needle tea, and the wrong person see you doing that, they say you doing obi at that time, you're making medicine, right? So it was very similar with stuff like JunKaNoo. Anything they didn't understand. And it's quite strange because though this was exacerbated by those laws, JunKaNoo was also this kind of thing where, because remember, they had a very paternalistic mindset.
Right.
And so on those days off on Christmas, and I spoke to Professor Kimani Nahusi up there in the United States, powerful professor originally from Guyana, and where we actually had lengthy discussions about this entire thing. And we had a good laugh when I told him about how they tell us that the slave master let us do it. And he's like, the slave master didn't let us do nothing. We just did it on the times that we had free. And that's their holiday. They ain't checking, they out partying, doing whatever, and then of course around certain seasons, it may make them more inclined to be more generous. Christmas, they might be a little more, but it's not to actually place the credit to them for allowing us to do it. Particularly when you know that one of JunKaNoo's military strategies was to invade the European forts on Christmas Day. So that actually seems more in line with the essence and the true spirit of JunKaNoo than them allowing us to do it. Particularly when you mentioned the laws that you just laid out, how is it that they were allowing us to openly have JunKaNoo when they were having fun side by side with us in this, as they try to portray it, yet at the same time, up until, like you said, the 1950s, 1960s, we couldn't even be on Bay Street, and that kind of contributed to it as well. And that is where, so when you look, for example, at the Kundum Festival and some of the more original ones, and then you see some of the accounts from the proverbial slave master and how afraid they were of it, we actually had to taper our JunKaNoo commemoration, not only to be more palatable to our colonial masters, but just to be a little more practical in real time, especially in the time and space that we're living in. That's how it became a parade, became a competition, which we actually got from Trinidad Carnival, ironically.
Even though we say that later on that we didn't.
Right, exactly.
So when we look at that now, we go across the border a little bit. Your research has taken you far around the world. And one of those stops are in Africa and Ghana in particular. And you indicated in some of your writings that JunKaNoo originated in I don't know how you pronounce that, a hunter
line. Oh yeah.
Okay. Right. And then it passed through the Caribbean and so forth into the Bahamas. And so my question is how? What was the movement that caused that to happen? Was it just the trade? Because I know Ghana is a trade and entrepreneur.
Well, trade was definitely a part of it, but it actually has more to do with an aspect of African history that's often overlooked. You see, centuries before the Europeans even arrived, you had the Arab slave trade. Wow, I wouldn't believe my battery on the way out, and I ain't get a charger. All right, don't worry, but we can get through this, right? So, but in ancient history, many of the West African groups, they actually could trace their lineage, and this has been proven by DNA, to the Nile Valley, stretching straight down to Kenya. And
so,
then,
Chris, let me stop you with that. We could take the break right now, and then you could get your charger and organized. And
all right, yeah. And I have to leave at 7:20. That's cool.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
All right,
we'll be straight by then. Yeah.
All right then.
All right.
Let me just
So we've been
I using my boy computer and I by him. You see. So I just gotta make sure. Let me see what he's saying with this charger.
Yeah.
All right. One second.
You're listening to something to think about with Dale Happy Knows. We'll be right back.
Yeah, and see Stephen Arthur's comment on the bottom there. He's one of our co-partners at Sankofa Flamingo. He is also a municipal MP, and he is one of the ones that relays a lot of this information to me as well. So but I can teach y'all. Y'all can hear a lot more about these guys. They'll be coming to the Bahamas soon too, so you could be able to pick their brain too.
Right. Yes. Yeah. We gotta have them on the show. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Cool.
All right.
We'll be right back.
Okay.
Sammy's Chicken. There's nothing like it.
Sometimes it's hard to find a company that can get the job done right. At Mission Complete, we do just that. Mission Complete offers a wide variety of services from janitorial to sanitation to pressure washing pool decks and patios. We're also proud to offer COVID-19 decontamination for your home or business. And for those multi-legged critters, we call in our pest control and rodent team. Why call 4 different companies when you can call just one and get the job done? Call us now and let's get this mission started.
Welcome back to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. And we're here this evening having a discussion with Chris Ömo-Shango Davis. And your video is gone again. And we're talking about JunKaNoo in your belly and how it makes us feel. And we've gone down the road where we've been talking about here in the Bahamas, what it means to be JunKaNoo, and debunking the myth that was said by some of the persons that JunKaNoo we were released by the slave owners to do, and Brother Chris is saying here that the professor said that we actually did it because they were out partying and celebrating themselves, and so we celebrated and so forth, and the like. And then also they have a direct connection back to Ghana through the trade, and we were just about to dwell into that aspect of the scenario as to why and how that connection is made. And there's a wealth of information, folks, that this Chris is being done, and I know he's been traveling a lot, and he's been capturing a lot of this information, and he's developing a book himself. We were hoping that the book would have been finished before Christmas, but I guess the schedule changed a little bit and became bigger. So Chris, you're back, but we still don't see your
Yes.
video. I don't know if you get any chances, but you could just go ahead with them.
Yeah, I don't think my video. You could hear me, right?
We could hear you. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think my video, because I had to go back on the other device, and I don't think the camera working on it. So apologies for that. But we were saying about how it was rooted with the Hunter people.
Right.
And how that all kind of came about. Now, the Hunter people are a part of a much, much broader group, much more popularly known group, known as the Akan people, right? And their main language, of course, is Twi. And in Ghana, the major groups are people like the Fantes, the Ashanti, the Ga, and so but the Hunter people, they number somewhere between 4 and 5 million people today. And they populate mostly Western Ghana, as well as a little bit of Eastern Ivory Coast. And they were a part of the major migrations of the Akan people coming from the ancient Great Kingdom of ancient Ghana. So many of these myths that you hear about El Dorado and City of Gold, they was actually talking about ancient Ghana, also known as Wagadu, which is the proper name. And then some of those people also migrated further south. Now, these migrations were chiefly because of Arab encroachment on these lands. Okay, and then in the 12th century, you had the Bono Kingdom, and then in 1270, I'm sure Mr. Stephen Arthur will correct me, I believe the year was 1270, when they then migrated again out of the Bono Kingdom. And there are two major theories on what a Hunter actually means. one of the theories is the people that dry themselves in the sun.
Right.
Sorry, it's three that I found that was relayed to me. One that dries herself in the sun, and that has to do with them crossing the Pra River to reach their region, and then kind of thanking God and drying themselves in the sun. And that is also linked to their typically very dark complexion that they also typically have, right? And then the other theory is that it means twins. And the Ahanta people are also very closely linked to the Nzima people. They even closer than you would say Bahamians and Turks people. They share language. They share many aspects of their culture, the food, and they almost could be considered to be one people in certain essences. But of course, they are also two distinct groups that are almost like a brotherhood that share certain histories and experiences. And those were the people who also produced the popularly known Andenkra symbols. So, like the Sankofa bird, and they have
Right.
all of these popular African symbols that are right. So these are some of the people that were the originators of some of these symbols. And again, they have a long history of fighting against colonization. So even in the beginning of their history and the founding of their kingdom had to do with them resisting Arab enslavement. And then they came out of that. And then it shifted into resisting European enslavement. And then, of course, we have our figures like JunKaNoo, aka JunKaNoo. Then you have a much later king, Badu Bonsu II. And this guy was absolutely amazing. And as a matter of fact, among the Ahanta people, Badu Bonsu is considered one of their last great leaders. He lived 100 years after, and this guy, his story, I don't have time to divulge it now, but his story is one that turns the historical narrative completely upside down. The places that you think are supposed to be about freedom and justice, like The Hague and Holland, they show you that some of their true colors, and it's something that's extremely powerful. It
Right.
was something that even was giving me chills, was bringing tears to my eyes, and when you meet the people and you go around there and you see JunKaNoo's fort and you see just a different narrative and the belief that they have in themselves and their history and the pride that they have in their history. And they all know, most of them know who JunKaNoo is. Most of them know who Badu Bonsu is, and all them, and Badu Bonsu, the great whale. And you have so many people from Hunters that, yeah, I'm the great whale, that
Right.
consume all my enemies and all of these things. So it's something that's quite powerful. And then that same essence. So when you look at our JunKaNoo, notice, I could make these comments because my mother from Trinidad, so nobody get offended. But we don't play JunKaNoo like this. Play mass. You
Right.
understand? We do the JunKaNoo. Some people say that we don't dance the JunKaNoo, and we just rush.
Right. Right.
We just rush. You understand?
Yeah.
And rushing is not something that's typically associated with having fun, is it? But it could
Yeah.
be, right.
Yeah.
So
But we just rushed, and our old person told me one time ago, I shouldn't say, an elder person told me one time ago,
yes, sir.
that we rush because when you dance, that's intentional. You have that in your head and you figure out you can do this move and do that move.
Hey,
But when
that's
you
interesting.
rushing, it just, whatever coming out is
Right.
what you can do.
Right,
Yeah.
and that is the way we kind of move the JunKaNoo. And furthermore, the people of Princess Town and the wider Hunter people, these people are the best dancers that you will ever see. And I talking about we was there during the Kundum Festival. It's one big long week of partying, and along with the traditional African stuff. And man, in the nighttime, we was just there standing up in awe. Because and when I say they could dance, I talking about everybody. Like if you take 10 people, 5 of them on that Michael Jackson level, like they
Right.
just
Yeah.
crazy dancing, and it was just amazing to see because it was something we wasn't really expecting, and they were so inclusive. Like, so even when we were documenting the Kundum Festival, we were being pulled in. They was pulling us in, man, you all standing up, and that's something that I found really interesting because, JunKaNoo is the one thing that has got us up and about and excited. I
Right.
always, and I was telling the people in Ghana, I was like, we have a lot of fun, but if you don't know us, you wouldn't know we having fun because we'll go right there and stand up and clap and watch your concert, and we ain't getting too sweaty and thing, but we enjoying the concert. We having just as much fun as everyone else. But the one thing that you will see us go crazy for, everybody dancing, everybody screaming, everybody running up and down, is JunKaNoo. And I think that this rush out that coming up at the end of this year, this might just be the sweetest rush that the
Yeah.
Bahamas ever had,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
We've
think
been
that
locked up for 2 years. We
oh
couldn't,
yeah,
we couldn't
this
move.
rush can
I
be
mean, even little fella like me who don't don't get out there no more. I done the JunKaNoo once, the so-called rush, and I almost died that first time. That's a challenge just to go around those laps like that.
Right.
And so I've never went back to do it like that. But I will be in the stands, moving in the
Right.
stands.
Yeah, man.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see
So
Brother Stephen there commenting,
yeah,
and so JunKaNoo built, he was with the people that built this fort initially, in Princesstown.
Princeton.
And
Okay.
right, and then he was the one who ended up eventually occupying this fort, because he was trying to do what he could to curb the enslavement of these Ahanta and Nzima. And there were many different groups that were all involved and tied into his forces as well.
Right.
I just excited for when the Bahamas has an opportunity to meet people like Stephen Arthur, people like Alice Kofi. And let's not forget that there's a man who currently sits on the same throne that JunKaNoo used to sit on. His name is Abou. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen. I'm struggling with the Twi language still. But, Augustine Yaw, Chief Augustine Yaw, or Augustine Yaw. And this guy sits on the throne that JunKaNoo sat on. And when I discovered this, I almost did a backflip. I was like, man, we have and so I think that Bahamians, this is a place specifically that's almost unprecedented that we could look to.
Right.
I don't know, and I hoping that UN and them take notice of this because they like make World UNESCO's heritage site for places where enslavement was going on, but for some reason the places where we is fighting it, where they don't want, where it goes against this narrative. The one fort in the area is JunKaNoo's fort. That's not a World UNESCO heritage site, and all the surrounding forts are World UNESCO heritage sites. And so it points to this troublesome European narrative that we've also been done, and this is why groups like the Ahanta people and the Nzima, of course, are not as known as they should be. And of course, not to take away from the glory of the Ashanti and the Fante as well, but the Ahanta people, super close to home. You understand? And it's a direct link there.
Yeah. So, Chris, I've been taught that Ethiopia is the only African country that wasn't colonized. But are you also saying that Ghana was also in the same light, that the fight
it depends.
kept him from being?
It depends on your definition of colonization, number one.
Okay.
And then number two, it also depends on which, I guess you would say, which political standard that you're observing. And let me explain that. Asante were in 1906, I believe it was, when the wars were coming to an end and the British were really just pretty much using machine guns and slaughtering modern day Ghanaians wholesale, regardless of what tribe you were from, essentially. And when the men were about to give up, it was Asante who actually stood up and said, well, if you the men won't fight, we the women will fight until the last of us fall in battle. Among most Akan groups, not all, but most, the Ahanta included, they have this ceremonial stool that essentially represents the power. So it would literally be, for example, if we went to conquer Great Britain, we'd have to get that crown and that mace, and that's the symbol of authority. And you will have people who will say, well, you all didn't win because you all never got the crown and the mace. You understand? Right. And so it was the same concept, particularly with the Ashanti people and the golden stool. And it wasn't only the Ashanti, So, of course, when you look at it from a military standpoint, many of them were conquered, or even if not fully conquered, at least subjugated and absorbed into the new modus operandi and the new status quo that came along with colonization. But in the case of the Ashanti and the wider Akan people, many of them will tell you that they were never fully colonized. And then, of course, you have to remember within these modern African countries, you have traditional nations, right? And so you literally in Africa, it's like you have 2 or 3 governments. You have the wider federal government or the Republican government. Then you have the municipal government, of which Stephen Arthur is a part of in Ahanta West. And then you have the traditional government, which is the one that I give the most credence to personally. And even though African leaders typically get a lot of shtick and criticism, one good thing that I'll say that many African leaders have done was kind of retaining this unspoken law that the modern politicians control the politics, but the chiefs own the land. And so in many incidences in Ghana, you could go to Minister of Tourism all you want. You can go to Minister of Housing all you want. He got to go to the traditional king and traditional chief. You understand? To get this land. And if you don't have his blessing, you in problems.
Yeah, nothing's going to
Right.
happen. And so we look at all of that as part of this. When we say the rush and everything, I see it as this is part of why we have this feeling, this in our belly feeling. And thank you, Stephen Arthur, for joining us and sticking with us and giving us all of these side notes on the side here and keeping us on cap in tune as to what is really happening and so forth. And so there's a festival that you were telling me about.
Right.
That is it is we are JunKaNoo became similar to that or like, and I think it's the masquerade
Yeah, well, you have you have several ones. You have the most popularly known one that is connected to our modern JunKaNoo is the Fancy Dress Festival in Winnipeg.
Okay.
However, the true origin of it is the Kundum Festival. Okay. Now notice the name Fancy Dress Festival. How did the African festival get the name Fancy Dress? When I actually visited Winnipeg on my first trip to Ghana, and we did a lot of research. The first official Winnipeg Fancy Dress Festival was in 1912. Some say 1914. You see that as a crucial year because that was when the so-called scramble for Africa was solidified. In other words, this is when African nations were solidified as colonies of European countries. Okay? And so the Fancy Dress Festival got its name from fancy dress masquerades that were popular all over Britain and all throughout the British colonies in the diaspora. Just as you see that kind of sentiment infiltrated our JunKaNoo parades in the Bahamas, right? It became masquerade and you're just dressing up to have fun and all. Some accounts even say we was mimicking the slave master. You understand what I'm saying? Right. And so it's quite complex. Now, the Winnipeg Festival, what is very interesting about that is there's actually no direct connection. You understand? With that. You understand? So with the Winnipeg Festival, it actually evolved similarly to our JunKaNoo, but independently throughout the 20th century. And now they're on and on. And when you take those two, it looks very similar. The confusion comes in with the Kundum. So even the Winnipeg Festival has its origins in some of these Kundum festivals among the Ahanta and the Nzima people. Okay. And remember, these things evolve, and in different colonial spaces, these things because people sometimes lose sight of how intricate colonization actually was and how it affected every single form of your life, you know. And so in order for you to, even if you weren't conforming or at least giving the illusion of conforming, you would have had to adopt some of these things. And that is how, because the traditional name is not the Fancy Dress Festival.
Right.
The name is Katamburi or something along those lines, right? It has a traditional name, but we know it as Fancy Dress. And so even in Winnipeg, you see where this British narrative has kind of almost polluted something that was almost purely revolutionary and purely anti-colonial in its original sentiments. In terms of since it began during that contact with Europeans and Arabs, right? Now, of course, remember, these were festivals that were a part of Africans' way of life long before any colonization or anything like that began. As a matter of fact, they can't even tell you when they start doing the Kundum Festival. You understand? That's how old it is. Some scholars date it to when they officially migrated from Bono Kingdom in the late 1200s. Because I guess that's officially when you could separate Ahanta and Zima from Bono, right? But again, and of course, they call in all of these different names of groups and ethnicities and tribes, and that again points to how diverse Africa actually is. And the predominant symbol in Ahanta West, it's in Twi, it's Fenton Funfunu, Denshin Funfunu. But what it looks like a very cool kind of star symbol. But when you look closely, it means Siamese crocodiles. And these represents crocodiles that are joined at the stomach. And so if these crocodiles do not cooperate, meaning those crocodiles, I think they are meant to represent the Ahanta people and the Nzima people. And so if these people don't cooperate, they will surely perish. Just as if you had two Siamese crocodiles, if they only want to do their own thing and eat when they'll both perish, right? So it was a beautiful, beautiful concept. They have all of these lagoons in the area. It was just magical, man. Like you have these lagoons, freshwater lagoons, and then it's like 50 feet of land, and then it's the ocean. And it's like just very, very, it's similar but different to the Bahamas in a lot of ways as well. And within these, many of these freshwater lagoons, they are considered sacred. And so you can't defecate or urinate in them. You can't use motorized ships in them. You know, they some of them filled with crocodiles, and never one time in their history have they ever have a documented crocodile attack in that entire region. You know, so this is a place that's extremely interesting, and it's not even just for historians. You know, Alice Kofi, who I mentioned before, he's a naturalist, and they have about 5 or 6 naturalists in this area where they take you on these canoes and you look at all these monkeys and crocodiles. So it's so much stuff to do in this area. And of course, you know, in a few weeks, we're doing another pilgrimage over there. Yeah. As well.
So when we look at all that, then all of this content, all of this vibe, this movement, activity that's happening over there,
Right.
To me, this means that when we operate, and particularly in JunKaNoo and the rest, it seems like we're trying to draw all of that back
Yes. Oh,
into
yeah.
our existence today.
Most
Because,
definitely.
you know, Dr. Miles Monroe always used to say, if you separate God's creatures from him, just like a tree separated from the ground, you will surely die. And so it seems
Right.
like, you know, we separated from that activity. And so we are like a child yearning for his mother, trying to get back to
Oh, yeah.
that scenario.
Oh yeah, that's a beautiful scenario, metaphor to use. You know, like a child away from their mother trying to get back to their mother. You know, and that is exactly what it is subconsciously. You know, even if it's subconscious. I remember it was one of those parades where I think it was either the Saxons, one of the two major winningest groups. It was either Saxons or Valley, and they had an African theme. And I remember I was sitting in the crowd, and it was about a group of women behind me saying, well, where are they going with this African foolishness? And I turned to them, of course, as politely as I could. They were seeing it to me and all of that. And I was like, madam, this entire parade is African. You understand? And so, and then they look at me kind of strange and me like, oh, yeah. And I was like, you know, it is, you know. But it wasn't any adversarial thing going on. But
Right.
I think we have to be proud. And a part of the problem, of course, is that Africa has been so heavily demonized. And a big reason for that is because we've been severed from our history. We've lost the knowledge and the connection that we have to these Ahanta people. You know, and as we release more and more information, and we put more and more projects together, I think Bahamians will fully be able to see, particularly as it pertains to JunKaNoo and our real origins, where we come from. You know, and if you look at it, many Caribbean countries, they have specific areas in Africa that they are linked to, you know, through kinship and through heritage. And we have the same right there in Southwest Ghana, not even just Princess Town, but also Agona and Buswa and some of these other areas. But of course, Princess Town was the hub. Right.
Right. So Chris, folks who listen to something about what Dale Happy knows, and we have Christopher Ömo-Shango Davis on with us. We apologize because he lost his video earlier, and so that's why you're only hearing his voice in the background. But he's a very astute and knowledgeable historian child, because I mean he's a young man. He's hanging out with some of the big guys, you know, who when you hear their names, you know, they have history on history on history of contributions. And so we know you will be doing great in the next 50 years. When people be talking about you, they will talk about you amongst the kings and queens.
Thank you,
And so
sir.
forth. But
Thank you.
we want to put you now, because we always say in this show, we want to figure out where we go from here, right? Because we
Right.
want you to pause, then we want to think about intentional, and then we want to know where we go from here. And so
Right.
I have this view that this year we can go to Ghana with about 100 odd JunKaNoo group and perform at the appropriate festival. And
Well,
then
boy, hey.
next year, they return, reciprocate by bringing a crew to perform in July during our 50th Independence. I think that's going to be powerful. It's going to open up a lot of opportunities for a lot of people, and particularly our youth. Talk to me about that in a few minutes.
We are already in the motion of building this heritage product between Nassau and the southern Ahanta West region. Okay. And this year in October, we actually will be taking a large contingency of JunKaNooers that will be there. That will be hopefully with the blessing of Atumfo Badu Bonsu the 15th and the Ahanta Traditional Council, as well as Chief Yor Augustine with their blessing. We will be able to have JunKaNoo groups as a part of the Kundum. And as a matter of fact, we're trying to expound on that because we want crop over people from Barbados to come there too. We want carnival people. You understand where I'm going with this? We want Mashrami people from Guyana to come there as well, because all of these things have a slight, at the very least, connection to this. Because remember, these people represent some of the earlier groups brought into the transatlantic slave trade, particularly by the British and the Dutch. So it's no surprise that JunKaNoo also exists in Suriname, Guyana, which are places that were former both British and Dutch colonies. You understand? So, so that idea that you have is one that when you make this connection and you start to see it for what it is, it's something that's bound to happen. And what we want, we were hoping to happen is to take that contingency over in October. And we actually hope to bring the man who sits on the throne of JunKaNoo himself to witness JunKaNoo the way that we do it. You know, we have, and this way we can get the competition in there. This next thing, you know, you get Jamaica versus Bahamas versus Ghana, JunKaNoo, and JunKaNoo just is divergent, you know. And I think that I grew up in a hardcore JunKaNoo family. You know, of course, I have a Valley Boys bias, I'll admit. However, I know that one thing that all JunKaNoo.
So you could have endorsed the video then. I didn't need to wait for them to answer me. They could just say. Anyway,
right? So, but yeah, you get where I'm coming from, though, right? So, so essentially, this is just something that connects all of us in surprising ways. You know, this connects us to Wilmington, North Carolina, Suffolk, Virginia, Belize, Southern Mexico, Honduras, St. Vincent, Barbados, St. Kitts, Puerto Rico, and the list goes on and on, you know. And of course, different places celebrated to a different degree. But we were the ones, proud to say again, to reiterate, that kind of kept this kind of going and kept it alive. And Hunter people also kept it alive, but as JunKaNoo, as a historical figure. But now that we've made this beautiful connection and it's gaining a lot of traction, they have a few articles that are now coming out talking about the links between Ghana and the Bahamas. You know, and the links was always strong in Jamaica because some of the names of the places we even retained that are also linked to JunKaNoo as well. But here in the Bahamas now, we have this kind of new explosion. Aha, this is where we come from. Oh, these are some people we can look to in Africa, except for looking at Lord John Rule in England and all of these people who, of course, we know were not honorable men in the least, you know. And so I just, again, have to thank you for having me on once again, allowing me to share, allowing me to promote what we're actually doing. You know, people could follow what I'm doing at Sankofa, Flamingo, but of course, I'm also in education now at AMMC. Proud to say, you know, and so you could also come to the Pompey Museum to see me there as well. But for me,
what's the hours for that?
Pompey Museum right now is Monday to Friday, 9:30 to 4:30. Do not come at 4:15 because we close at 4:30, especially if you're coming to see me, because you know I could be a little long-winded. It's actually mostly reading exhibits. You would come with your kids, but you would always look for me. I'm always there. Request me. You could even call ahead, say, listen, I want Chris to give me this spread, you know, and that's all good. $3 for locals. I think it's free for children. Yeah, $3 for locals.
Only $3?
Yeah, only $3 plus VAT, of course. You know, $5 for tourists. Kids under the age of 8 years old are free. Yeah, and so I encourage Bahamas to come and enjoy. We have a lot of new stuff coming in, a lot of new stuff in the works, where we will actually planning to do exhibits, not only on my research, but some of the research that others are actually doing as well. And I'm very excited for what we're about to be doing this year. I think Bahamians will really have something to really grasp on, something from historical perspective that we could really be proud of. You know what I mean? Because JunKaNoo is protecting almost that whole region from slavery.
Right.
You understand? Like, and the main areas, they considered him their minister of defense.
So,
You know, so this was in
is that how
Ocala.
you pronounce the name, Chris? Is it
JunKaNoo.
Say it again.
JunKaNoo. So Gyan. That's where the John comes from, understandably. And Kwao. This is the official Nzima and Hunter dialect of how they say his name.
Right.
Now, under the Ashanti dialect, they actually call him Jan Connie.
Okay.
So this is because the Dutch called him January Connie. The Germans call him Johann Connie. And the British, of course, call him JunKaNoo. Now, we believe that there's several theories to how the canoe came about. One of them is he actually owned one of the largest canoe fleets in West Africa at the time, which made him very wealthy as well. Another reason was kind of just this kind of British ignorance where they see us around canoes. They have a lot of lagoons in the island. They don't really care too much to learn the language. And they just say, JunKaNoo. But once you get there and you see all of the different variations of his name, you can most definitely see how those names manifested here. And so even like in North Carolina, for example, they call it John Cooners.
Right.
You know, John Cooners. So you can see, but it's all this Kwao, JunKaNoo, John Khan. All of it is connected to this great hunter, warrior, and chief from the early 1700s. So.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you kindly for joining us. Sorry you had the experience with your technical activities, and we apologize once again for starting late, but and we're appreciative that you were able to go on beyond 7 o'clock to give us that second piece of the knowledge there, and we look forward to receiving your book. When you come out, you have to find time to finish it, because that's what Dr. Miles Monroe say. You have to finish your book. I started mine. It's just in my head. It just need to get on paper. But but I'll get it there sometime too. But yours way ahead of mine. So you need to get it up, because yours have a lot of value in helping us know who we is, as we say in the Bahamas.
Who we is, right? Yes, sir. But thank you for having me on, sir. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Good. Yes. So, folks, you've been listening to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles, and we love that you were able to stay on and listen to what Chris had to say today, Christopher Davis, and we hope that there's been a value to you, and that you will find a wisdom that you would want to share this video with all your friends, get the knowledge out. Hit the like button if you like it, so you could get more updates and notices when there's more coming, and then we will be having more shows to help elevate and enlighten our whole Bahama land and this part of the world. So once again, stay safe and be merry. And this is the Festival of Masquerades. It's not one of the big ones that Chris had talked about. All right. Thank you, Madam Producer.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative 242